Good evening, gentlemen. Thanks for joining us for Man's Night. You can please be seated for this fervorino. Since we're in the presence of the Blessed Sacrament, my words this evening are restricted, however, not restricted to the same extent that it would be in preaching at a homily at Mass. So I've sort of taken some liberties. With that in mind, please accept the words that follow as personal musings of an admitted ham who is given to hyperbole. It's not much more than that, though perhaps something less. And please take what I say this evening with a grain or two of salt. If you or I were to make a list of places that we would choose not to visit while on vacation, toxic waste dump is likely to make the cut. A toxic waste dump is a place designated for the collection, isolation, and storage of chemicals and materials that are harmful or even deadly to living things. So by its very nature, a toxic waste dump is not an attraction, but rather a repulsion. This does not bode well for our contemporary understanding of masculinity. The title, I believe, that was given to the talk was a Defense of Masculinity, and in an odd way it's going to end up being a defense of toxic masculinity. And our description of the toxic waste dump does not bode well for this, because so often in our contemporary culture we hear the word masculinity described as being toxic, right? Our previous characterization of the toxic waste dump suggests that this is not going to make masculinity more attractive than its unadulterated form. Not only that, the frequency with which toxic is used to modify masculinity in popular culture has the potential to give masculinity itself a bad rap. Though I suppose the use of the modifier implies that there is such thing as a non-toxic masculinity from which it is being differentiated. That said, is it even possible that a pure and uncorrupted masculinity is non-toxic? Or is it the case that masculinity is toxic by its very nature, and that its very toxicity ought to be embraced? If you're assuming or even hoping that I will come to the defense of masculinity by solemnly declaring it to be just as non-toxic as femininity, you are going to be disappointed. Let's briefly consider the two, femininity and masculinity, and get at the essence of each. It seems to me that the essence of the essence of the feminine is to nourish or nurture life. To be feminine is to be life-giving and life-sustaining. We see this clearly in mammals. When we understand the relationship between a mother and her young, this life-giving and life-sustaining essence of femininity requires no further explanation. It is self-evident. However, allow me to offer an innocent example from my past. I can still recall more than 25 years ago, be at peace more than 10 decades before my ordination, during a visit to the beach, seeing the feminine form of the lovely woman I was dating at the time, recognizing that her hips provided a perch or two on which she could rest a small child for whom she might be caring. It was awe-inspiring and beautiful, but also something foreign, for I was and am a man. Speaking of man, it seems to me that the essence of masculine is to protect life. To be feminine is to nurture and to nourish life. To be masculine is to protect life. While the feminine gives and sustains life, the masculine protects this very same life from being harmed or even killed. And this is precisely where the innate toxicity of masculinity is going to be manifest. Toxic is defined as containing a substance capable of injuring or killing a living thing. And it's very likely we experience toxic automatically as bad. Toxic as automatically as bad. The same way I was speaking with Father Erickson today, we often experience punishment as bad per se, but that's not true. Clearly, toxicity is an undesirable quality in puppy chow, baby formula, and beer. Toxicity is undesirable in those things that nourish and sustain life, that is, in the feminine. However, not so for those things that protect life from being harmed or even killed. That is not so for the masculine. Rather, toxicity is necessary for the masculine. Take, for example, herbicide, which can be used to protect life, the life of edible and ornamental plants that we want and desire, to protect these from what we would call weeds. Toxicity is necessary in an herbicide. In fact, without toxicity, it would cease to be an herbicide, and it would no longer have the potential to protect the desirable plants from the undesirable that threaten to choke out the desirable. However, for it to be useful as an herbicide, that is, protecting some plant life from the danger posed by others, it must be selective in its toxicity. For example, Roundup, which is a powerful herbicide capable of killing any number of both desirable crops and undesirable weeds, has the wonderful benefit of not being toxic for animals and humans. As a toxin, Roundup is selective, killing plants, but not killing or harming animals. However, as an herbicide, it is not selective because it kills plants without discrimination. There are, however, herbicides that are selective, killing some plants, such as grasses, but not others, like vines, other useful plants. A key to the usefulness and effectiveness of the herbicide is in its selectivity. My claim is that although it may strike us as some combination of undesirable and politically incorrect, masculinity by its very nature is toxic, however selectively so. It is toxic towards evil. As long as there are living threats to the good, and especially the spiritual good of the human beings entrusted to our care as Christian husbands, fathers, grandfathers, uncles, and brothers, whether these threats are individual human beings or corporate entities, we must be willing and able to protect our charges by having the potential to harm or even eradicate these threats selectively. It would be interesting, I think, to identify an organization that threatens the spiritual well-being of our families, and to put our energies as Christian men into opposing such a threat. We are perhaps fortunate in Oakdale and Maplewood, and that we do not suffer from the obvious moral evils that threaten our cities, such as abortion mills, crack houses, and motels renting rooms by the hour. Though it may be more challenging for us to identify these threats in the suburbs, they're almost certainly present, if only on the not-too-distant rocking east side. Though this is not the talk I anticipated when I set out to prepare a defense of masculinity, I hope it will serve for some food for thought. Please do consider what threats to the good of our families are operating in the East Metro. In what ways is God asking us as authentic masculine Christian men, both as individual husbands and fathers and collectively as members of the church militant, how is God calling us to protect our families from those individuals and institutions that threaten their good? Let us acknowledge and even embrace the selective toxicity of our masculinity and use it for the good of our loved ones by fighting the evil that threatens them. So I'll go to the confessional. We'll have adoration till about 7:35 or so, and then we'll have benediction.